First off, an apology that it's been 3 weeks since my last episode. So this Maycember is kicking my ass, y'all. And I wanted to say thanks for sticking with me because producing my own show has been a ride. But we only have 2 episodes left of season 1 before I take a break for the summer. And then I will be returning in October for season 2. So if you're an author, an editor, an illustrator, influencer, or any kind of publishing related professional and you want to be on the show in season 2, then head to quillandkettle.com and get on the list through the contact form. Okay, on to the show. Welcome to the Quill and Kettle podcast, where intuition meets industry. Join me as I sit down with authors, editors, designers, and other publishing professionals for tarot-guided interviews that blend business, psychology, and magic to dive deep into what it really takes to build a sustainable and inspiring creative career. Each interview is guided by a 5-card tarot spread that I've created specifically for this show. The cards are interpreted through an archetypal lens rather than used for divination. The intention held while pulling the cards for each interview is you, the listener. I hope each episode brings you closer to finding your own aligned path to a creative career that fits your life. Today on the podcast, I'm sitting down with a dear friend who sometimes feels more like a big sister than anything else. So we tried our very best to have an actual writing conversation and not just a live catch-up in front of everybody. Jolene began her publishing career in 2010. Since that time, she has worked with small presses, medium presses, and large presses. She has also independently published a large handful of titles. She's worked with 3 different agents at 3 different agencies. She spent about a decade as a freelance editor, both with her own company as well as contracting with several mid-sized publishers. She writes all over the genre map, often reorganizes how she approaches her creativity, and currently spends about 1/6 of her work life on her writing, and the rest of it with her horses. In this episode, we are guided by the 6 of Cups reversed, which brings up a sense of nostalgia. It can be great as long as we don't get stuck in wishing that things were like they used to be, especially in an industry that changes as fast as publishing does. In the unconscious wing, we have the Wheel of Fortune, which maybe indicates a bit of an unacknowledged understanding that publishing is a series of trends and best practices that ebb and flow. You may feel that things aren't going your way, or you may worry that the trends will turn away from what you're used to. And the bridge card here is the Fool. Maintaining a sense of wonder, curiosity, and faith that stories are forever, even if publishing is cyclical. You've handled it in the past, and you will handle it in the future. In the conscious wing, we have the 9 of Swords, that glorious overthinker. Try this, write this, post this. The need to keep up with everything and be everywhere all the time and feeling like you're just failing at it all, even though you know in your heart that you just needed a nap, a rest of some sort. And the bridge card here is the 3 of Pentacles. So get those thoughts out of your head, get them into the real world, and get help building a framework or a structure that works for you. But the card that I pulled for this conversation was the 6 of Cups reversed. And so that is the card of nostalgia. And the reversed is kind of the idea of getting stuck in the past. And for industry specifically, when it's about like business career, it kind of feels a little bit more like the old methods, right? Like
Right.
we've been in this since the very beginning of
Yeah.
self-publishing,
Yeah.
and so like some of the things that worked, they don't work anymore. Some of the things that didn't work then work now, and so it's just like, yeah, it's just interesting that you say that too, because that's the card for
Okay.
the core of our conversation is the idea of nostalgia.
Yeah. And it is. And it's
But
recognizing that, again, people are always like, what's your best writing advice? And I tell people all the time, you need to find your people. You need to find other writers because nobody will understand the ups and downs like another writer. And I said, and then you also have to recognize that you can write an absolutely brilliant book, but it still has to fall in front of the right person at the right time. So,
Mhm.
if you're going to be traditionally
Yeah.
published. But if you're independently publishing, it's the same thing. It's writing the right story at the right time and hitting the right few readers at the right time for them. Because even
Yeah.
with all the paid ads and everything else, the books that go really big are the books that everybody's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to open up with you as well was so I've been very excited to talk to you and so excited that I actually showed up a week early.
I know. Still, I was like, oh, Allie drew cards for us a week early. That's so thoughtful. I'm going to have a week
Yeah.
to kind of ponder those cards. And then I was driving. I literally saw that as I was pulling out of my driveway. And then I'm driving to Utah with my kid Jesse and their girlfriend Annie, driving to Utah. And and so I'm not checking anything. And I get these messages. Hey, are you there? Are you okay? Did you like die on your farm? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then I realized I was like, how badly did I mess up? And so I scroll back and I'm like,
No,
okay, no, I'm okay. Allie
that
was
was
just
me.
here a week early. We can resort it. It'll be good. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
funny.
That was funny. And so speaking of finding your people in your community, so yeah, I was here waiting for you, but you were on your way to a movie premiere for so I just wanted to chat with you a little bit because I know like you have this kind of core group of people that you have sort of been with since the beginning. And like if you follow you on social media or any of the like 5 or 6 or 7 of you or whatever, like you're always doing these things together. And so I kind of wanted to open up with that. Like how important is it in this industry to find your people and where do you find them?
So I have basically, this is going to sound so weird. I have like cultivated since I started writing the people that I want to spend time with and share space with. And I have people like you who I love to teeny tiny pieces, but we will not talk for months. And then we pick up right where we left off, and it's fabulous. And then I have other people that I talk with pretty
Hmm.
regularly. Interesting about my group right now is I really have one, Kaylee Baldwin, that I knew from the very beginning. Her and I both published a book from a very small Christian press that we both regret writing. We both regret having published, and the experience with them was not great. But you bond over that kind of trauma, right? So again, it's that like slowly curating people, right? And some people you stay in touch with and some people you don't, and that's okay. Um, but yeah, so then there's other people that I met kind of earlier on, which really I put you in that group, and Steph Campbell and Krista Desir and Kelly Vitolo, who um, writes as Riley Hart now and wrote as Naire Dawn for a while. And I don't talk to her for a couple years, but when there's something specific that makes me think about her, I reach out, we go back and forth, and it's lovely. And you really do you keep some of those connections. But yeah, for the last probably 7 years or so, definitely since I moved to Colorado from Alaska, I have this group, and one comes from sketch comedy writing and a YouTube show. One comes from writing very, pretty clean, wholesome romance. Um, Another comes from that. I have another friend who's a fantasy writer who's just got agented over the last year and is not yet published, pre-published, we call them.
Mhm.
So it's just interesting. And then my friend Clarissa, who runs her own small press, um, and after quite a severe injury falling off a horse, which is how her and I bonded because we're both horse girls and also writers, her writing has come, it's been a little trickier. So she's put more time, effort, and energy into her press. So our backgrounds are all very different. But yeah, the movie premiere, I'm always like, it sounds fancier than it is. It's a smaller, it's a smaller company that did it, but it was so, so fun. And it made me remember why I love independent creativity, because
Mhm.
I sat and I had a lovely chat with John Lyde, the director, about some of the shots in between. And I told him, I said, because I'm good friends with Sarah Eden, I said, I know you guys were operating with a small budget. And so as I'm watching it, every time a moment was taken to set a new scene with something beautiful, there was deer, there's a sunset, there's blowing grass or whatever, because it was a Western. And it
Mhm.
was so fun to see those shots and to recognize all the time and attention that went into that. And then he was able to say, funny story, the area that we shot now has a lot more modern stuff. This is footage that I took 10 years ago that I thought I might need at some point, and I pulled it out. And I was like, and that right there is why I will never be a director. But I can imagine doing that with manuscripts, right? Of
Yeah.
going like, oh, I have this character, or I have this place, or I have this one idea that I never saw through. I can imagine doing it with writing, but with something like that, there's no way. But his brain just works that way. So that's the joy of the independent things. But yeah, we all met up together again for Sarah's premiere so we could, cheer her
Mhm.
on and, chat with the director and learn some interesting things. Because as writers, I think we're
Yeah.
endlessly curious.
Yes, that's true. And also like keeping on kind of the community aspect because so when I was pulling the cards for this interview, I actually pulled too many cards. I pulled a sixth card, which I don't usually do. I was just like on a roll, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
pulled the sixth card and it was the 3 of cups, which is kind of that which I thought was very interesting because it is the card of community, it's the card of celebration and of sisterhood and that kind of stuff, and so I just wanted to stay on that idea of community for a second because I do think that sometimes, and I did this way back when I was a baby author, and I'd see other people do it where you kind of really, like, look up to the people who are doing really well when you get started, right? Like, the people who are sort of like in the alumni rather than in your own graduating class kind of thing and just kind of chasing that but the importance of finding your community in your peer group because you're experiencing the same things, you're going through the trenches at the same time, and this idea of like building like sisterhood, right? And building up and getting and being able to celebrate each other's successes. Cause, like Sarah Eden has a movie out now, which is super cool. And her Kickstarter was fantastic. And I like followed along the whole thing. I love Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But like when you first became friends with her, you bonded over what you were going through at the time and you were able to help each other raise to that kind of level. And so I just thought that was an interesting thing to kind of touch on because if there are people who are starting out and who are like, oh my goodness, all of these authors, like they have their crews, they have their groups, they have their things. I want that. What would you kind of how did you sort of make these connections? I know you and I connected over the fact that we were Northern and I had pink hair and you liked pink hair. And I was, and then we're like, we're best friends now, and but like other than that, how do these kinds of connections get made? Because writing can be very lonely as well.
It is very lonely. And I think and especially for someone like me, I don't really share what I'm writing when I'm writing it, or very rarely do I. I think people tend to believe that their group needs to all be mentors. And the reality is that you really only need one or two mentors. And there are so many places online now to find. And I recognize that it's a less personal mentorship, but it's not super difficult to be around people who are just a half step or a step ahead of you, or a half step or a step behind. I hate to use the words ahead and
Mhm.
behind, but at a different place, right? Sarah Eden just released her like 80 something book. And
Right.
you know what I mean? I'm nowhere near 80 books, and that's fine. We're not in a competition. I don't care to, produce that many stories. So it's just, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's finding people that you recognize you can talk through some of the really difficult things with, but the people who are also going to celebrate with you when something good happens rather than congratulating you to your face. But I had one, I won't say names, but I had one person who was kind of reaching out to all sorts of different mentors that I knew her, and she was just like, oh, I'm going to be best friends with this person and also this person and also this person and also this person to have all
Mhm.
these different mentors. And I remember that she read one of my books and she was like, I just felt so much better because I read this book that your publisher had done, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can totally do that. And I was like, okay, great. I mean, that's good for you, but it was just very strange. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
That
oh,
is.
that wasn't anything special. I can do it. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the point, is that I put the right book in front of the right person at the right time. But it was just weird. There
Mhm.
was something about it that was weird. And then, yeah, so that's one that's not going to stick, right? Where I have
Yeah.
other people who come to me and they ask me questions, and they're not, they're just starting their publication journey. And then we end up just clicking and we end up being really good friends. And Serene Heiner, who does Magical Book Nook, is a great example of that. She's like super kind, super nice, super giving of her time, energy, and talent. She's so humble and she's so good at what she does. I've read a few of her
Yeah.
books now and they're so good and they're so fun. And she's agented now, but she hasn't yet sold one to a publisher. But we still somehow feel like we're on the same playing field, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like, because I don't care where you're at, you change one thing and you're, in a sense, you're starting over. I'm writing for adults now. I'm starting over. I took a few years
Mhm.
off and I did nothing but editing. I'm starting over. So, it's not, we want it to be that, gentle, steady uphill climb. And it's not that at all. It's, up and down
Mhm.
and back and forth and everything. So
Yeah, Serena's great. I interviewed her as well.
awesome.
And yeah, and I also did some coaching with her, working on one of her stories, and she has the coolest ideas.
Yeah, she really
Like,
does.
really, really does. But yeah, that's the story before that's interesting. That reminded me, actually, I've totally forgot. Probably just blocked it out of my mind. I remember when I released my first book, Tight Knit. There was
Uh,
a girl who had kind of like slid into my DM sort of at that time, right, and wanted to be best friends.
right.
And then when the book came out, like messaged me this comment of, oh, what did she say? It was something along the lines of like, oh, your book is only doing well because all your friends are famous. And I was like, oh,
Remember
okay.
that.
I was like, first of all, yeah. I love my friends and they're great and they've helped me a lot, right? But like, and then like I think I responded something like, "Oh yeah, I guess that can help, but like time will tell whether the writing holds up," right? And that book
Right.
was like my best-selling book and sold every single day until I took it out of print. So obviously I did something right. It was my first book, so sometimes like, that you look back on what you've written and you're kind of like, "Oh geez, like
Oh,
I wouldn't do it that way now." But still,
right.
I remember being like, "What? What? What? Why are you what did I ever do to you?" Like,
I know, right?
it's
Well, and I hate
very
to shed things
weird.
in a negative light, but I'm also like, what not to do? Don't be like, oh, yeah, I read your book. The only reason it did well is because your friends are famous. And it's like, you don't realize
Yeah,
how little a bump from even a huge name author is going to change things.
yeah.
When Love Blind came out, Krista Desir and I had some pretty big name people who posted about her book. And you really couldn't, in sales wise, I mean, it was super kind of them to do that. But like sales
Mhm.
wise, did it get anything? I don't know. A couple
No,
$100.
I think that people really there's a lot of false, faith in that kind of stuff. Like,
There is.
even like, I ran a Kickstarter for this podcast, and I have landed some pretty amazing authors who have really big platforms for the podcast. However, that it didn't the Kickstarter didn't fund. Like, it doesn't really do
Right.
anything. It can, but you can't really bank on it and you can't count on these things happening. It just does if it does, and if it doesn't, if it doesn't. But you have to like stay kind of true to, like, even though the Kickstarter didn't fund, I'm still here. I'm still doing it. It
Right.
was always going to happen. It was just like that way I, could have hired some help. That was like literally all I
Right.
wanted to do was hire a producer. But now I'm producing my own now and we'll see what happens
It'll,
in the end. But like, yeah, it doesn't really necessarily do much.
no.
I don't know where I was
Every
going
once
with.
in a while, it's a huge name. I remember it was some author event that somebody had put on in San Francisco years ago. Gosh, it probably was like 2015 or 16. And they were joking. Colleen Hoover had just released her second book, and we're sitting around the fire outside as we do because I'm good friends with Steph Campbell, who knows Colleen. And Colleen was playing around, tweeting about people's books, and you could watch the numbers rise. So it depends on the
Mhm.
audience of the person posting, like so,
That's
so
true.
much. Because some audiences are big, they're just rabid, right? And I
Mhm.
think Colleen Hoover is one of those people who's attracted this just insanely loyal fan following, and it's
Mhm.
brilliant. But
Yeah.
it's interesting. And then I've had other people be like, oh my gosh, you just finished, this was so great, and they were a fairly big name at the time, and like crickets. So
Mhm.
it's the audience, it's really the audience, it's the readers and the audience and the community that the author has created. If we're going back to community, it's the community that author has
Mhm.
created to make those people feel like they're part of something special. We're the readership of this person.
Yeah.
Makes a difference. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do find it's very genre specific. I find fantasy, romance, adult fiction, that kind of stuff. But like YA, which is what we both sort of started out doing, it really
no.
didn't like. There's no rhyme or reason to as to like why teenagers like things.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. Have you ever watched an episode of Smiling Friends? It's like no.
Mm-mm.
It's like the most unhinged, brilliant thing ever. You need to watch a couple. But my kids are
Okay.
really into it. And I'm like, this is so delightfully weird. Like, I'm so excited to see what kind of fiction comes out of our generation that's in college right now. Because it's going to be
Hmm.
weird. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I highly
Yeah.
recommend if you're in the mood for like, this is literally somebody's, like, impulse control not being reined in at all while telling a story. Like, what if? And then just jump in. What if? And then just
Oh.
jump in. So they're totally unhinged and they're delightfully weird. And yeah. Anyway,
Oh, I love that. Well, I'll
there's
have to.
your
Yeah,
there's
I'm.
your man. If you're gonna watch, you're probably gonna pick a weird episode and you're gonna be like, what the hell is wrong with you? But there's a lot of really good ones. So anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm starting to get back into that kind of stuff too because Isla is
Okay.
just about 11. And so she's like 100% obsessed with Percy
Great.
Jackson. We're moving into all of that like so I'm reading Percy Jackson with her right now. And,
Cool.
like, 10 years ago, I feel like if I would've read it, I would've been like, "Oh, yeah, this is fine, and it's whatever." But seeing her engage with it and how funny she thinks it is and, like,
Yeah.
and then just having a preteen and seeing her and all of her friends and, like, how friggin' weird they are, and then just
Yeah.
kind of, like, getting to, like, live through it in that way, I find, like, I'm really super enjoying it, but she loves, like, Wednesday and,
Yeah.
like, she just likes really dark, weird things, so
That's
I'm
so
sure I'm
strange.
headed straight for that. It's just gonna
Yes,
get
you
weirder from here,
are.
I
Yep.
think.
That's great.
Um, so speaking of, you had mentioned that you were writing for adults now and starting over. So what does that look like? I know you kind of stepped away from things and you've had a whole bunch of things going on and then you started a farm, in typical you fashion. So what the hell, Jolene? What the hell?
Well, I was at the point I was one after my last book came out with my publisher, I was super frustrated with them. And I had one or two more young adult contemporary ideas that I wanted to write, but I wasn't like burning to write them.
Mhm.
And they're just not gonna come out great if you're not super excited. And I had already done that. I made pretty good money for a few years, for about 4 or 5 years, independently publishing romance and then doing my young adult stuff through a traditional press, right? So that's my background. And I was just like, this is supposed to be fun. I'm supposed to love it. And I like it. And I'm grateful I get to make my own schedule, but I'm not dying to sit back down at my computer. And so I basically wiped the slate as clean as I could, given that there were a few more speculative ideas or some more like kind of big Lizzie, sorry, dog, border collie,
Yeah, life
squirrel.
happens.
Yeah. So more just like social issue things that I wanted to explore. My husband's a prosecutor and he brought home a few cases that I was like, whoa. And then I kind of reimagined them in a way. And so I was like, these are the stories that I really want to write. So I'm like, okay, if I am, because I've always been big on we have our passion projects, we have our paycheck projects, right? If you want to be a career author, you're going to have some projects that you just write because you need the paycheck. My bathroom needs to be remodeled. I'm going to write a few romances, right? And then you have your passion projects, which are the ideas that you think about as you fall asleep at night, that you dream about, that you wake up in the morning and you write little you just had a thought or a line that hit you and you have to write, right? These are our passion projects. And I realized like I don't want to write paycheck projects anymore. So I did do a few romances for charity anthologies. It was a way to just kind of keep a toe in publishing without being all in, and then spending all the rest of my time just clinking on my passion projects. And then horses, we went from owning one horse when we first moved down to Colorado. And my husband was really nervous about how much the horse was going to cost. And then literally 4 years later, we bought an entire horse farm. And we now, I mean, the joke is that I have a 1-year-old filly and a mini, and they count as one horse. And we have a senior horse that lives on the farm, but he feels like the farm's horse. And then I have my two main Spanish fancy horses. So the joke is we have 3 horses, but the reality is that we have 5. And then there's almost 30 horses on property at any given time. We have between 22 and 30. So it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Hmm.
But then I'm outside if I have playlists for the passion projects that I'm working on. Um, so it's just I kind of have those playing in the background when I know I want to be writing later that day. So right now, I mean, we've owned this place for just over a year. So I'm still trying to find that good balance. I just did a writing retreat, which was, I finished an entire book. I think I got 20,000 words done. I finished the book, was able to reread the ending a couple times. And now I'm letting it sit for a couple weeks before I go back. But I'm realizing that my writing is going to be my Mondays, which are my day, kind of off. And then it's going to be when I do these retreats, and that's how the writing is going to happen. And that's fine. So I went from just having that, like, so much validation for how fast I could write to feeling validated. Now my validation is coming more from being just so excited to tell these stories that have been pinging around in my brain for so long.
Hmm. Yeah, I sort of feel like I'm in that boat too. Like, and you and I have talked about this before. This idea of that, like, people think that it's a failure if you sort of step back or slow down, or like there's just this,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
this race that you kind of have to keep up with, and this amount that you have to publish, and that, like, hustle culture and all that kind of stuff. And that oftentimes when people sort of step back, whether it's from social media or from publishing as much or whatever, there's this idea that you're kind of like a failed writer. But, like, it's okay to pivot. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay. Like, even if you decide to quit writing altogether, I think this is the conversation we were having, and it wasn't about us. It was about somebody else, but it was like somebody who had just decided that they just didn't want to write anymore. It just wasn't their thing. It wasn't like what they wanted to do, and they stopped doing it, and that's okay. It was successful. It was fun. It was great while it lasted, and then they just moved on. And so you can, like, it's I don't really know where I'm going with this. Jump in.
It's a much I know where you're going with it because we've
Good.
had this conversation before. So
Yeah.
I think it's a much greater failure to continue doing something that you started for joy and is no longer bringing you joy. That to me is a much bigger failure than saying
Mhm.
I either need a break or maybe I'm just done entirely. I had fun doing it. It was great. That's a fun moment in my life. And I'm going to do something else with my life. That to me is a giant win.
Mhm.
If you recognize, hey, you know what? I've been writing fantasy for 10 years and I loved it. But to be able to stop and be reflective enough and observant enough of your own self to recognize you don't love it anymore and you want to change it, I think you should do it.
Yeah.
To me, it's a much greater loss for you to continue doing something that's no longer bringing you joy. I've started to ask myself in every situation, do I have to be here? Do I not have to be here? If I have to be there, is there something I can do to make it more enjoyable or less torturous? I will do
Mhm.
that thing. If the answer is I don't have to be in this space, then I don't stay in that space anymore.
Mhm. I
It's
wonder
so
how much of
simple.
that do you think is just kind of attributed to age and stuff, and
Oh,
season of
probably
life
a
as
lot. I
well?
mean, if I had known this in my early 20s, life would have been so much breezier.
Yeah.
It's a very hard learned lesson, sadly.
Yeah. And I turned 40. I'm just about to turn 41, and I remember, like, in my early 30s, or when I first started going, like, like, you and I are very similar in that sense that we can write really fast. When we know what we want to write, like, we can just hammer it out really quickly. And I remember people saying, like, who were in their 40s, and or who are older than me, and were saying, like, you just stop like, it's just, there comes a point where you're just like, you stop caring. You're like, whatever, blah. And there's this 40, like, this kind of thing about being 40, 40. And I was like, that's nonsense. Like, how can you just turn an age and then all of a sudden everything just switches? I turned 40 and I'm like, you know what? I'm quitting social media. I don't give a shit about any of this anymore. All of you can just like go away. I'm doing what I want to do now. And like
Mhm.
just like setting boundaries like left and right. And it's fantastic.
It's
And
so
it was like
fantastic.
pretty much right when I turned 40.
Yeah, same for me, and I think it's a cultural thing. It's so many different things, right? But it's this like your 20s and 30s. Are you the best mom? Are you the best runner? Are you the best writer? Are you the best at whatever it is that you're doing? And then you turn 40 and you're like, God, that's exhausting. I'm done.
Yeah.
Like I'm just gonna do what I want to do, how I want to do it. And I'm not gonna step on anybody. I'm not gonna be,
Mhm,
you know what I mean? It's not a matter of rudeness. It's really a matter of
mhm,
kindness to yourself and letting go of all the things that aren't serving you. And then but I think it gives you such a greater appreciation for the things that are serving you and for the things that
mhm.
are working. So I do have 5 cats and 3 dogs. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of, they have to crazy Lizzie and Boots the cat and,
Oh, a lot of movement. Oh, I
hi,
love it.
he's
That's great.
great.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely I'm so happy for you, like, for just
Oh, I love
seeing,
it.
now that
Yeah.
I'm kinda back on social media, so I sort of disappeared from the world
Yeah.
for
You
forever or
see,
for a little
see what's
while.
happening in people's lives again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, that's fun." You're
Yeah. It's super fun.
yeah, but,
So yeah.
yeah, so with the
Mm.
horse farm, is that what you call it?
Yeah, sure.
It's
Hmm.
just a horse farm? Is it a ranch? I don't know. Are you a rancher now?
No, I don't have any cows. I don't have any livestock, just horses. We're
Oh, okay.
For horse people, we're a multidisciplined dressage-based training lesson and boarding facility. How's that?
Oh, that's a
It
mouthful.
sounds so fancy.
Yeah, it
Very
does.
chill. We just have
The
people who
lot
do everything here, and I love it.
Yeah. So you said it's a lot of work, which I totally, think.
Yeah.
So for some reason, horse people love me. For some weird reason, really close friend of mine here, Alita, she's a horse person, and she used to work on a therapy. She worked like with equine
Cool.
therapy, which was really cool. And my illustrator, who is in Italy, is a horse jumper, I think. I don't know. But, anyways, I just attract horse people into
Yeah.
my life, and I'm not sure why exactly.
Because
But
you have that, it's where practicality meets creativity, right? That would be
mm,
my best guess. And you're very practical, you're very pragmatic, but you also dream really big and you also
mhm,
have this really interesting creative mind. And I think horse people are very similar. You have to want a creative life to want to bring a 1,200-pound animal into it, right? And then
right.
you also have to be very practical because they need to be managed as if they are toddlers because they will try to kill themselves like a toddler tries to kill themselves out of
Yeah,
curiosity and
yeah, like any sort of way. That's what like people keep talking about this as the year of the horse, right? The year of the fire horse. And like I just see all these like all my horse friends are like, "Oh
friends,
my
you're
God,
like,
have you ever met a horse?" Like this this is not gonna go well.
"This is gonna
These
be a
things get
wild shitstorm."
yeah, these things get spooked by a plastic bag and they
Mhm.
literally will eat themselves to death. Like, is that
Yeah, that's what you're after? Okay. Well, and it's like
yeah.
that, healthy as a horse, and we're like, whoever said that did not own horses. Okay, so here's Boots. Isn't he cute? You
Oh,
pick
he
him up
is.
and he just starts purring. It doesn't matter how weird you pick him up. He'll just purr. That's awesome.
That
Oh,
is awesome.
Lizzie's on the floor
Um,
going, now.
yeah, Freya is uninterested. She she's still
Yeah.
as uncuddly as she's ever been, and she's almost 14 now, so she's just, like, old
Wow.
and crotchety. So, she's just a crusty old lady. She's like that
I
"Get
love
off
it.
my lawn" old lady, you know?
I love it.
Um, still love her, still love her. Still
Yeah.
healthy, still running, you know,
Yeah.
many kilometers every week, but, yeah, not
Amazing.
really. Not she'll come up here if she wants to go out or if she needs something, but that's it. She's
Right.
not gonna come cuddle
Otherwise,
me.
no. That's
No.
funny.
Yeah, it is funny. So anyways, back to the horses.
Yeah.
How how do you kind of balance that with your creative work now?
I don't. There's no balance. There's no
Fair. Yeah,
balance. It's,
fair.
I'll have a day where I'm like, I'm gonna write all afternoon, and then a horse will break through a fence and farm comes first. I gotta fix the
Mhm.
fence. Right?
Mhm.
So that's why I do my best to take Mondays off, but it doesn't always work. Monday is the most common day for national holidays in the US. So Mike has Mondays off fairly often. Rachel, who is also an editor and also works with me here on the horse farm, and she's also a writer. She does Monday morning feed and stuff like that, and my kids do Monday evening feeds. But they're still like today. I'm going to have to hop in my skid steer and move a couple big bales around. So there's not really a day off. I think it's
Mhm.
just that this is the day that I can focus on writing, or I try and recognize that, hey, all the horses I need to work have already been worked 3 times this week. So today, when I finish morning chores, I'm going to go in, I'm going to make myself a nice big cup of coffee or a nice big hot chocolate or something yummy. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to set a timer for an hour. I definitely have an hour. And usually once that 30 minutes to an hour is done, it's good. My hardest thing as somebody who is quite ADHD and doesn't react well to ADHD meds is changing from one thing to another. So
Mhm.
it's for me, if I can write for a whole day, I will get a ton done. If I have 90% of the day to write, I will get a quarter done of what I would if I had the
Right.
whole day. Because it's that shift from one thing and finding the momentum and the energy to completely shift from horsewoman to author. It's such a hard shift. And then even within
Yeah.
authoring, shifting from the social media presence, website, what's published, what's not side of me versus the creative side. All I want to do is sit in my hole and write books and then send them out, and I don't care what happens with them at that point. um so
Right.
anyway, so that's the hardest for me, is trying to find a way to shift. And I used to lean on my community more, but I'm such an unreliable person to like share morning lists with or tasks with or whatever, because my day can get derailed so easily. And then I can't support a person in that. So then I have to be my own support person. And that does get tricky. So that's like, lack of community. And it's not even a lack of community, it's just recognizing that I can't put in what I need out right now. Right. So I have a couple of people where I'm like, hey, I got a lot done on my book today. And they know me well enough to know, just give me, thumbs up, go you. But that's really
Yeah.
all I can do. It's not a matter. Well, I used to share lists with people and we'd check it in the morning and check it in the evening. And that was lovely. But my life does not work with that now at
Yeah.
all.
No, that's fair. I can't really do that with folks either. Like the only people that I can really successfully work with like that are like other ADHD people
Yeah.
who won't be mad at me for like ghosting them for weeks
Right.
and then showing up and being like, "Hey, I have like a 50,000 word book I need you to read by Monday," you know?
Right.
And there are very few people
Mhm. You can do that
who
way.
I can do that with, right? Like and also knowing that I don't wanna be like that guy either,
Yeah.
right? And because then if it's the other way around, I'm very selective of who I do that to, as well,
Right.
because I know that if the tables were turned and they came to me and said, "I have this book, I need you to read it by Monday," I'd be like, "I don't have time for that." And
Yeah.
like so I don't wanna be that person who expects things from
And
others
someone
but
else. Yeah.
can't follow through
Right.
from my own end. So I work well, like even like you and I have always worked well in that way because we're like, yeah, just read. Here's the thing, read it whenever you can. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
there was one, you had sent me one, and I'm like, I really want to do it, but we're moving. So I don't know if it's going to happen. And then I kind of
Yeah.
forgot about it. And then I mentioned it to you months later. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an asshole. I totally forgot about it. And you're like, oh, I'm not even doing that anymore. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. So glad that I reached out before I like sat down and read the whole thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Which is
Funny.
kind of funny because now I'm doing that again. But like
Yeah.
it's just yeah, you need to have like people like that who know how
That
you work
understand.
and aren't gonna be mad at you. Like, my poor husband
Right.
just, like, doesn't know what's going on half the time because he's very, like,
Yeah.
type
You pick a
A
path
in
and
that
you go down the path. And
Yeah,
you're
you
like,
do the
yeah, no,
thing.
you pick a path and you go down the path a little ways and then the path gets boring. So then you need a different path because clearly your life choices that led you down this path were unhinged on the day that you chose that. So now you have to
Yeah.
shift this way. And I think one thing that I've learned, I turned 50 this year. I think one thing that I've
Oh,
learned is all of those little starts down different paths are the thing that helps you kind of grow and learn and hone in. And I
mhm.
also recognize that if I didn't hop down a lot of different paths, I would be very bored with my life. So it used to feel like wasted time and I
Yeah.
used to get frustrated with myself for doing that. And now I'm just like, dude, that was a fun little side trip. Let's hop back on the main quest if there is even a thing. So, you know,
Yeah,
changes.
that's kinda how we started talking about it in my house too, like, with my husband, he'll be like, "Are you side questing?" And I'm like, "Yes."
Yes. Or you're
I'm
like,
on a side
no, this is now the main quest. And then next week you're like, so that's a side quest.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
how
I
I
think
am. Yeah.
he also knows better than to actually believe me, but,
Yeah. That's fun.
um but yeah, I do think that's interesting too because like, I am not a pick a path and go down. I consider
Right.
myself more of a mind mapper, you know? Like, if
Yeah.
you had to put it
Yeah.
visually, I don't really
Right.
do the thing. I do all the little bubbles and everything is
Yeah.
kinda connected, and
Yeah.
everything that I've done and learned helps me with the thing that I'm doing now, and I can find
Mhm.
those, like, patterns and
Connection.
that kind of stuff, and it's just such a joy for me to work with people and talk to people who can keep up with that,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And there's, like, a few my therapist is one, and, she's so great because she's, like, dyslexic and ADHD as well, and so she's, like and she's an art therapist, so she's, like, just
Perfect.
blah it out, everything out, and I've got things in different spots, and I'm not talking about them linearly at all, and I'm, like, moving chronologically all over the place, and she just puts it all together, and she's like, "So, seems like this is what you're saying," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's exactly what
Hey,
I'm
it is
saying."
what I'm saying. There was a
She's
theme here all along. So interesting
Yeah.
enough, I've been working on this book that has three sisters in Southeast Alaska. It's a story you're familiar with because I talked about
Mhm,
it 8 years ago. And just trying to figure out how paranormal is it? Is it not paranormal at all? Is it very magical, but you don't realize it till later? So that was my big thing with that book. And I fell down this rabbit hole of patterns that we see all over nature, and it was really interesting. So, like close
mhm,
up pictures of the human eye. If you have never looked at human ashes under a microscope, it is beautiful. It's so
hmm,
cool. So, that, and then you see those patterns in space when they're looking at other planets, when you're looking at sort of that. Anyway, when you're sort of looking at the stuff in space that looks like the same thing as human ashes under a microscope. But it's just interesting to see. And then the patterns of, interesting things firing in a person's brain. And when you look at just those firings and how they scatter, you start to see these patterns everywhere and everything. And I
mhm,
find things like that just endlessly fascinating. So it was really fun when I finally realized that this book needed to be told from the unreliable narrator sister and nobody else. When I finally leaned into that and her ability to see patterns everywhere, which helps her
mhm,
believe in magic, which helps her believe that she'll be able to bring her daughter home, right? And so it was a
right.
really fun thing to explore, and it was such a fun rabbit hole to fall down. And I spent a couple long afternoons last summer when it was too hot for me to be outside because I'm a big baby with the heat, just like falling down YouTube videos on quantum physics and
Mhm,
patterns in nature, and it was so much fun. I loved it. So that's my favorite thing about writing. It's just and finding all these micro communities about every
mhm,
interesting thing out there. There's a micro community, even within all the people who are big into alien sightings and follow that. Like they have little micro communities. You know what I mean? And that's
mhm,
something I would not have known about if had I not been an author and not been interested to write a book about people who follow alien sightings, right? So, it's I think that's my favorite part about being an author is you get to touch in all of these fascinating communities of these
mhm.
very niche ideals and ideas and beliefs and the things that excite that community. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I do think, like, writing is such a great career for neurodivergent
Yes.
folks. 'Cause, like, it
Well,
I the
you
same
can chase it.
I became obsessed with trains, right? And then I write,
Yeah.
like, and so now I
Well,
know everything about how, like, how, steam engine okay,
right.
now I don't know anything because 'cause I've
Yeah.
moved on, but
Yeah.
but
That
yeah,
was
like, and then
the quest. You're on a different quest now.
yes, I'm on a different quest. I only have so much room in my brain for information, but I like,
Yeah.
um, so I became so interested in how trains work that I just ended up setting an entire book on a train, and then I was like, "What happens on trains? Circuses. Circuses happen on trains." And so
Yep.
we're gonna go
Yep.
with it, and, it's just such a great way to feed all those little side quests and feed all of that curious brain
Right.
stuff while also staying within a relatively stable situation where you can write it into books and you can use it as tax write-offs and you can
Yeah.
like all of these kinds of things as well. Um so what are you working on right now?
A couple things. So I'm forcing myself to take a 2 to 4 week break um from my sister's book. I have one book in with my agent that I'm waiting to hear back from. I thought that I had picked my next project to do personally, but I'm working on one with Sarah Eden involving the 40 Elephants, which was a female crime syndicate and
Hmm.
in London. And their heyday was in the 20s, bright young things, all of that. But they think that they were operating in the early 1800s, even. They definitely know they were operating in the late 1800s. But women were left alone in shops. If a woman was in a shop by herself, they were not to be approached, they weren't to be talked to, right? And so
Mhm.
they stole a lot of stuff. It was so easy, but it was really fascinating. There's not a ton of information out there about them. Um, the guy who wrote and or produced or directed or wrote or all of the above Peaky Blinders is doing one about the 40
Mm.
elephants. We had started this
Oh,
project
cool.
before then. We were like, hey, cool. So, we have kind of a now and then. I'm writing the now, which is 1920s, and Sarah's
Right.
writing the which is 1880s. And my character really wants to be part of this group, like desperately, desperately. And hers sort of gets pulled in against her will because she's a seamstress and she starts sewing the extra long pockets into their coats. And she's like, this is weird,
Right.
right? So, anyway, so it's been a lot of fun. The research has been a blast and the writing has been a lot of fun. So, I'm working on that. I have a wild idea for an alien. I call it my alien book for lack of a better word, but it goes from a kid who basically grew up in a tiny home with his parents and they just drive all over following alien sightings. And then
Hmm.
it pans to different people at different points in time and different histories and different, just everything kind of revolving around the US version of that. So I've just been playing with it. It's an idea that I had. I was going to write it as a YA contemporary book from this kid. And then I realized I actually think there's a lot more to this idea. I think we have people. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun. I've fallen down all of these on these conspiracy theory sites and following all the dialogue that's happening there. And so I think it's going to be told in some strange little snippets. I love multimedia in my stories,
Mm.
whether it's, short videos or journals or news snippets or case files. And that's another one that I'm working on in Southeast Alaska, about these teens who are mad at this guy for sexually assaulting their friend and don't believe anything will happen and they decide to take justice into their own hands. And this is a real
Mhm.
case that my husband worked in Alaska just before we moved down here. But of course I've worked and changed and worked it a
Mhm.
ton. So I'm playing with that one too. So it's kind of right now I'm in that mindset of because I just finished a really big project. I'm like, whatever I feel like writing for the next 2 weeks when I sit down, I can play with that. The end of that
Mhm.
2 weeks, I need to work on this book and then I need to pick one of those ideas to get serious about. So I'm kind of in my playtime right now of I sit down, I open one of those, I just kind of see what feels exciting, and then I move on. Um,
Right.
so,
Do you
and then I
write
have
in
an idea
multiple
for a dystopian that takes place on a farm just like mine, because that would be a lot of fun. And I think about it
Mm.
when it's, super cold outside and I'm breaking ice on water troughs and things like that. And I think about what it would be like to be living off the grid and trying to manage that.
Mm.
So then that sort of just lent itself to a fun dystopian thing. Also, I
Nice.
live in the US and our country is currently just going up in flames daily. So,
Yes.
yeah, it's
Yes.
so fun.
It's horrifying.
It's horrifying. If you haven't read Hell Strikes the Match, or for anyone who hasn't read that, it takes place in a near future US that is in civil war. And it was really
Mm,
fascinating. It's not really about the war, it's about her and her dating life and her relationships and her relationship with her parents with the backdrop of a future US in civil war. It's really good.
huh.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of a little bit tricky when dystopian becomes current
current.
events,
I know.
contemporary
All the
literature.
memes that are like, I wonder if Canada is just like, why do I gotta live next door to the meth house? Yeah. You're
Yeah,
welcome.
well, I mean, like, honestly, Canada has never been as united as it is right now,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah, we
it's
gotta do
because
something about those southern border neighbors because holy shit. Yeah.
they keep talking about taking it. Well, it's interesting too, because I live so close to the Alaskan Panhandle,
Mhm.
and, like, when we go back like, when we go there, um, to visit, people, like, say thank you. They're like, "Thank you for like, not abandoning us." Like, we're
Right?
'cause
I
the
can't
we're
believe you
basically
just crossed the border, but you're white, so you're probably fine.
Yep.
I know, I know. Not what this
Yeah.
podcast is about, but that's okay.
No,
Here
but,
we
I
are.
mean,
But
it
it's still
affects things, right? Like, first of all,
absolutely.
it's important, like, I just had an interview with, Willow Winters, and she was talking about this bill that was passed or that wasn't passed, this bill that this person keeps trying to write in, and it's about putting erotic romance authors in jail, basically, and so we were talking, and we got political and that kinda stuff,
It affects your
we
creativity. The political climate you live in, I mean, and the books that stand the test of time are the ones that are speaking volumes about the current society. Fahrenheit
Mhm.
451, 1984, Great Gatsby, talking about, the disparity
Yeah.
in the 20s. So many things.
Brave New World, which is one of my favorite books
Oh,
ever.
yeah.
It's and now it's, like, more real than anything,
Yeah,
but also, like, one of the other things we had talked about too was this idea of, like, writing and reading is political. Like, when people say,
it is.
"Quit being political," you're just an author, quit being political. Like, the writing is political, reading is political. The fact that, like, we're women and we're allowed to write
Yes,
books under our own names and make money
right.
from those books and read books, that's political. That was
That's
a political
political.
fight
Mhm.
our
Was that?
foremothers fought for us,
Yeah,
and then there's still tons and tons of work to be done with intersectionality and, like that dismantling privilege and colonialism. I live in a First Nation community too, right? And so these are things that are constantly in the forefront of life. And when we write, we also write from our own personal experiences and the way that we live and what we've gone through and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not all autobiographical because people like to also think, you know, that
right,
as well. It is just, like, synthesizing information that you're getting from the outside world and putting it
right,
into stories too, like you
right.
were saying with that book you were writing about the case that your husband was working on,
Yeah,
right? And changing enough details so it's not recognizable, but also, like, these things happen and that, like, I was talking with Willow as well about a book that she wrote about a story that she had seen that horrified her, and so she took the story and kind of twisted it and rewrote it as a thriller to be able
yeah.
to make it have the outcome that she
She
wished it
wished
would
it
have
would have.
had.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I did that with
that's
Stronger Than You Know. So Stronger Than You Know, which was one of my first traditionally published young adult, I think the third,
mhm,
traditionally published young adult novel, and I wrote it because of a case my husband had that was horrifying. And I
mhm,
took just some details of the child abuse of that case, and then I gave the case the ending that I wish the real one would have had.
mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, I was heavy.
But it's part and
It's part
parcel,
of what makes you write. That book is still I mean, I think I drafted that book in 9 or 10 days, and really only a couple scenes were added later on. The rest was just kind of fleshing out the point of view and strengthening the language. So, I think when ideas hit you in those spots that hurt and those heavy places and those hard places, for me, it makes it so much easier to sit down because I have to, like, quote unquote make it right, you know? I wanted to find a way for this heartbreaking story, and that was my way of working through a trauma of a thing that didn't happen to me, but that my
Mhm.
husband was peripherally involved in.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
therapy.
Yep. Yeah, it is. And like the idea of writing those kinds of things, I find to be and I'd love your thoughts on it, but I find writing about them is so much I don't wanna say easier, I like, it's just so much more soothing, I guess, for me and feels like it has more of an impact, one thing that I've said before is that you often if you listen or see any social media or blog posts or things that I kinda, like, do out in public, I don't really talk about a lot of these things, but if you read any of my books, you will know exactly where I stand
Right.
on a lot of different topics because I feel like, it's so much easier to, like, sit with it, think about it, process it, kind of alchemize it,
Right.
and do that process instead of just being, like, getting on social media and, like, blasting, and I'm not really, like, a
Right.
loud advocate kind of person.
Right.
I have panic attacks. A friend and I accidentally walked into a protest, and I just, like, immediately started having a panic attack because it's
Yeah.
like, that's not what my nervous system can't handle that kind of
Can't
stuff.
handle you being in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, writing about it, thinking about it, researching it, talking to people who are advocating for certain things and putting it into a story format is something where I feel
Right.
like it's a lot easier for me to do that, and so I don't like the word easy because it doesn't need to be easy, they're still hard. It's still
It's still
hard to do
hard,
these
but
things.
it's the way that works for you. So I think it's
Mhm,
like the path most well, the easiest path would be to shove it away, right? I
mhm,
mean, although that always bites you in the ass later. And then the
yeah,
next, it's just that's how you process difficult things, right? So
mhm,
I think when we are able to recognize that we process difficult things by writing about them, then it's like, well, if I'm going to have to live in that shitty thing for a while I write about it, I might as well just really lean into that and use it.
mhm,
When shitty things happen, it's like, okay, I'm going to use that. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to remember this. And then it's going to unravel itself in a story somewhere in a
mhm.
situation that is not the same, but is adjacent or similar.
Um, so I just was in the process of reworking some of my older projects, and I
Mm.
just read from start to finish Silver and Stone.
Oh, I love that story.
It's so cute.
It really is. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
You and I both literally put that out into the internet and then we're like, whew, we're done with that and moved on. Like, well, I don't think we hardly talked about it. People are like, wait, you wrote a fantasy? And I'm like, yeah, it was so fun. I did it with Allie and they don't even know. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
so bad at that.
Yes.
Yeah. My
I
job
am too.
goes out. I want to be done then. I want to move on to
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
so is that kinda why you switched to focus more on traditional publishing for that? Or, like, how or are you just happy to just write books and put them out there and then just who cares what goes on
I'm
after
not
that?
sure. Here, I think I have a much different I used to want all my passion projects to be traditionally published and my
Mm,
paycheck projects to be my independent stuff. And I don't feel that way at all anymore. I think I am also going through my old manuscripts
mhm,
and I'm like I think the hard thing for me is that I have, romance is one facet of my personality. I
mhm,
am not a romantic. I am not really open about those parts of my life. And so it was always really hard for me to talk about my romances.
mhm,
And so I kind of sat down and I think I'm going to go through them again. I'm trying to hit that spot between, you know, clean and wholesome, which those readers are just rabid if something they feel is too steamy and that's super frustrating
mhm,
or really spicy and I find really spicy readers to be delightful. If
mhm.
a book doesn't have quite enough spice they're like oh well and they move on. If you
Yeah,
have this lasts too long and clean and wholesome, the author is going to hear about it. So, and
Yes.
so I'm trying to just kind of market, I think. So this is in very early beginning stages. It might be a side quest that I then stop. Right now I'm like, I'm just going to lean in and see how it goes. Um, Create a whole brand new pen name, keep things quite separate, I think.
Mhm.
And kind of have a fresh start on that front. I have some stories that never were published that are done. I have some stories that I always felt like could be like they didn't know what they wanted to be. They didn't know if they wanted to be more of a closed door romance or more of a steamy romance. And I think I'm just going to go through them and find that nice midpoint and put them all together. They all sort of connect. I have a few series that all connect through one book that overlaps too. And so I'm just going to play with that and I'm going to put those up and then I'm going to decide if I want to do the same thing with my historical romances because I love a historical romance that's somewhere between a squeaky clean one and a bodice ripper, right? I like
Mhm.
to have a little, I'm sorry, they were like real humans with real feelings and real like passions that I think sometimes we sort of wipe that clean. And I
Mhm.
think the other thing is that, and this is a fun thing of that Sarah Eden has talked about, where she's like, any actual romance in the Regency era is like 1 out of 10,000 cases of marriage, right? She goes,
Right.
so even just writing romance in a historical setting, we are thoroughly
Mhm.
modernizing it already, because it was such a rare occurrence. So
Mhm.
I think taking that into account and then just recognizing like if I'm going to write romance and I'm already kind of stepping slightly outside of what is going to be exactly historically accurate, then I'm going to play just a little, not a ton, but just a little bit. So I don't know what I'm doing with my historicals yet, and but yeah, I'm just kind of playing, and then I think I have 5 spec fic ideas, urban fantasies that are lightly drafted and just kind of sitting there. You've read a couple of them, I think, and
Mhm.
they're just on my computer waiting for me to know how they want to be finished off. So my hope right now is that if I keep working on some of my passion projects for adults, I don't really care, if my agent wants to shop them or if they get sold, then great, and if not, then that's fine too. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes with authors who are multi-genre or
Oh,
multi-passionate,
yeah.
it's just
Finding a
like
readership is very tricky.
it is, and also staying especially then you add, like, neurodivergence on top of that or anything, and the idea that self-publishing like, I have this kind of theory that like, way back in the day,
Mhm.
like the '80s,
Right.
and before that, there was, when you wrote there was only traditional publishing, right? And so
Right.
you wrote and you
Right.
wrote and you played and you tried and you found your voice and you
Right.
whatnot. Whereas I feel like for me, I've spent the last 12 years just playing and finding my voice
Yeah.
publicly, right?
Yes.
And putting out
Yes.
romances and fantasies and urban fantasies
Everything.
and, all of these kinds of things because I'm just playing in it. And you've said that word often in our
Mhm.
conversation, just playing. So what
Yeah.
does that what does that mean to you? What does that look like for you? What kind of pressure? Because you seem like you don't put a lot of pressure
No.
on
No,
your
it's
work.
all play. It's all experimentation. And this is where I love the parallels of working with horses and doing writing stuff, right? So something that works with one horse when you're training them up is not going to work for another horse at all. It's always different. Any horse trainer that comes out and says, this is how, these 4 steps are how to get your horse from this point to this point, or this is how to get your book or your writing from this point to this point, are full of shit. It doesn't work.
Mhm,
It works 1 out of 10 times. That's fine. Maybe it works 8 out of 10 times. It's not going to work 100% of the time. So I think once you get used to the idea of, yeah, that was, people are like, oh, I hated that story idea. Well, I didn't. I loved it. And it was something I wanted to play with at the time. And I did. And I played with it and I put it out there. And now I'm working on something different. That's it. And
mhm,
same with horses. This is an experiment. This is a thing that I wanted to try with this horse to see if I could get this result out of. This thing didn't work. So we're going to try something else because there is no
mhm,
one size fits all in either of these. And I think once you lean into that, then I like literally, I used to care a little whether a book was independent or traditionally published. Like, oh, I have to save my good stuff for traditional publishers.
mm.
No, I don't. Like, honestly. So I don't. I don't care right now. Like, I don't care at all. So if my agent is like, oh, I don't really want to shop this, I'm going to be like, okay, cool. I am going to spend a ton of time. And I got this from you because I remember a while ago, you were like, I want to play around with some video storytelling, just some interesting scenes, play in the woods, just play. And my husband and I went out we went on a hike. It's Corona Arch hike out toward Moab near where Arches National Park is. And we did that. And it was such a fun hike. And I took pictures and videos through the whole thing. And then I added a lot of that into this book that I had initially written about 10 years ago that takes place in Colorado. And then we ended up living here, which I just think is
Mhm.
delightful.
Yeah.
Then I was able to take those things from that hike and kind of put them in there. So then in my mind, I'm like, whatever. I'm going to be like, hey, I remember dreaming about hiking in the Colorado wilderness. And then I wrote a book about it. And then I moved to Colorado. And then my husband and I did this hike and I got all these shots, which reminded me of the book. And then I can start just playing with that, right? I can just start. And then I'm excited to talk about it. Like, I'm excited to talk about where the characters came from, why I wrote them the way that I did, why I did things the way that I did. And then suddenly, when you have all this excitement about this story because you just experimented and had fun, marketing isn't really marketing anymore. It's really just you
Mhm.
being like, "Oh, I had the best time doing this. I had the best time doing this." But if you don't like books where there's like little videos interrupting the narration, you are going to hate this thing, right? Or, skip them, but you're going to miss out on the story, whatever. I had a blast
Yeah.
writing it. And so, that's the thing. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I got this,
No.
so I bought my like prize baby boy precious. I call him Timmy. His name is Tempest Collie, but God, nobody's gonna say that on the daily. So I call him Timmy. And so my Timmy, who's this like super fancy bred for like upper level dressage, and he's my sweetest boy. When his half sister came available, the lady I bought Timmy from just reached out and said, "Hey, do you know somebody?" And I'm like, I'll ask around. So I kind of asked around. And then all of a sudden I was like, I think I need this horse. And she's literally the most difficult horse I have ever played with. She has just like these massive opinions. So all of these things that worked with her half brother and he just like fell into and just naturally did lovely. She's like, yeah, this is bullshit. I don't want to do that. So
Mm.
I'm having to completely rethink how I approach her, even though their breeding is similar. They share a dad. They were raised by the same person and they are completely different creatures. And I think the same thing happens. You go into my Three Sisters book, is a completely different creature from my Triangle Pass book.
Mhm.
They both have elements of, is this paranormal? Is it not? One is a little more definitely, yes, we have this kind of multiverse thing going on. But you recognize like as much as I thought these stories were similar, the deeper I got into both of them, the more I realized they're not really very similar at all. They're dealing with different themes, different ideas. You know what I mean? They need to be told one is like third person with video essays and journals, and the other is just a first person unreliable narrator, right? So,
Mhm.
they're very, very different. But in my mind, when I first started them, they were on my list of like 5 story ideas for adults that may have paranormal elements. So they're going to have the same readership. And I'm looking at them now and I'm like, I don't know that they do have the same readership. I think the Venn diagram of the readership is like tiny little fingertip overlap, right? And I'm just like, I don't
Yeah.
care because I'm not going to write something that I'm not excited to write?
Mm.
So
Yeah, and putting too much pressure on it as well. Like, I mean, I guess there's something to be said for people who are writing specifically to make money, and
100%.
that's a valid path, and if you do that,
Absolutely.
there's a set of rules that you kinda need to sort of abide by. But for
And
like,
some
I
people
am a
thrive in that.
librarian. Yes. Yeah.
Some people thrive in that these are the parameters, this is the structure. I have to make it interesting and I have to make it feel new, but also familiar. And I don't think anybody gives writers who write commercially that way enough credit for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like puzzling, right? Like, and
Yes.
that's truly what I like about romance, because I'm like, okay, you
Mhm.
have your couple, there's these beats, there's these things that you have to hit, these conventions you have to hit. It has to end happily ever after. They end up together
Right.
always and forever.
Right.
And so it's like, cool, that's great. So how do I take all these puzzle pieces and how do I fit them
Make it
together
interesting.
in a way that is interesting and that is a
Yeah.
slightly different? And that to me is such a different process than when like I'm working on my fantasy, my like Robin Hood meets My Little
Oh, yeah.
Pony.
Excellent.
series. And
Mhm.
it's such a different beast. Like right now I'm writing lore. I'm writing an actual
Right.
religion. And so like
Right.
it's just
So
um
different. The
it's
whole
so
world is
different.
open to you, and there's
Mhm.
something very unnerving about the whole world being open. And that's why I do. Like, I'm never gonna stop writing romance because I do love when I just have massive decision fatigue. I'm like, okay, here's the parameters. Here's my like trope or the leaning into the trope or the trope that I want to lean into. Now,
Yeah.
how am I gonna make it me? How am I
Mhm.
gonna make it interesting? How am I gonna make it so that I'm super excited to do it? And then all of a sudden I have a million ideas that I can't wait to sit down and write because sometimes taking some decisions away actually makes us more creative and
Yeah.
more excited to work on a particular project.
Where are do you exist these days online if people want to find you or read some of the stuff that you have out?
I don't know. I would literally I literally was chatting I literally was chatting with a friend the other day and I'm like, I don't even remember which of my independently published things are up and which are not. I think the best place to find me is Instagram and I'm under Joe Writes Books. I was
Mhm.
under my granddad's JRV because it looks really cool written. The JR and V kind of go together. And I did that for a long
Mhm.
time. I'm ready to let that go. So I'm at Joe Writes Books. And if you want to see all the horse boop, noses boop, horse things, then it's Compass Line Equestrian. But that's linked from Joe Writes Books. So that's all you need to know. Instagram, Joe Writes Books. That's my happy place. I get to go on
Right.
Instagram for 3 10-minute pieces a day.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. I
And the
have
rest
to.
is just horse stuff.
The rest is just horse stuff, and it really the horse stuff that I do is really not for any purpose. It's just to journal the things that we do on the farm, and it's for the students who come, and they get so excited when they see their faces on our Instagram page, and that's
Mm.
literally all it's for. It's just our
Yeah,
community journal is what Instagram is for.
that's
So,
awesome.
it's great. It's really fun to do social media with no purpose, or for the
Yes.
purpose to be a log or a catalog. I love that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just document a history.
A history. It's a history. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
All right.
that's it. That's
Well,
where you find me.
thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Ellie. It
I'm
was
sure
super
I'll bring
fun.
you back on.
Just like
Thank you for listening to the Quill and Kettle podcast. If you have found inspiration in this conversation, please share it with a friend or leave a review wherever you are listening. If the cards have brought up anything for you, I would love to hear your interpretations in the comments. And please head to quillandkettle.com to sign up for weekly editor's notes where I talk writing, marketing, and branding from an intuitive perspective. If you would like to go deeper into each episode, be sure to join the Athenaeum for extended tarot reflections as well as behind the scenes and bonus content. So I think you picked up that this show is about thinking for yourself and following your own path, but for legal and ethical reasons, I just have to say it. The views and opinions expressed by the guests of the Quill and Kettle podcast do not necessarily represent the views of the podcast or anyone who works for it. All stories portrayed in this podcast are meant for entertainment purposes only and are not meant to be taken as mental health, medical, financial, or business advice.